Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zichermann. It is a sunny, although very cold, January day in New York City, and I'm here with you, and I'm so excited to see everybody. It's the exciting part, the start of the year, and great to have you all here. As many of you know, and all of our regular guests are logging in and checking in and starting to talk. Today's session is actually a open Q&A session, so just me and you together for the next 30 minutes, answering your questions about gamification and engagement and all the hottest topics that are on your mind. If you if you have questions that you want to ask, well, all you got to do is actually log in. So first, you've got to log into the Spreecast platform using one of your social networks, whether that's Facebook or Twitter, where I think those are your only options, or you can create an account on Spreecast. And once you're logged in, you can actually ask a question. And those questions can take the form of text or video. See those buttons that say like camera or question, click those buttons, camera or question, and we'll actually bring you on here. I'll answer your tech questions or your text questions rather, from the chat or from the queue. And if you've got a video camera, you can actually click that button, come online with me, come on screen, everyone can see your face. I'm sure you are beautiful and shiny and have lots to say, and I would love to talk to you. Okay, so many of you know, I'm just gonna point it out to you, I just came back from a very long tour of duty. I like to call it a tour of duty, traveling around the world, seeing people talking about gamification. In fact, we just wrote an article, I just wrote an article on gamification.co about my experience going around the world. And I want to say to everyone who's watching or has watched, and those of you who saw me in Sao Paulo, in Dubai, in Tel Aviv, in Amsterdam, and everywhere, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. And it was great to meet everybody. It's been such a fascinating experience to go around the world and talk to everyone like this, and to find out what everyone is doing. And one of the things that I have found is that we, and this is what I talked about kind of in my in the article, which the link to is posted right there. The differences between gamification in a place like the United States or gamification in countries like Argentina is actually much more granular than you might imagine. So it's really not like universally different. It's not 180 degrees from one location to the other. In fact, in many ways, we're quite similar, and in other ways, we're quite different. Many of the challenges that people are facing, for example, in Singapore, convincing upper management to try a gamification project, getting ongoing funding beyond an initial sort of spike, talking about it in the linguistic sense. What does it mean? What are the, what are some of the complications? Those things are all very similar. But many of the other questions that people ask, many of the other situations that people find themselves in are quite different. The cultural climate, for example, in Europe that folks have to deal with if they're doing gamification of the enterprise, radically different from the cultural climate, for example, in East Asia or in the United States, where we may be more open or more welcoming to the idea of using it in a work context versus in Europe, where that may be a little bit more challenging for folks. So this has been very interesting. The link to the article's up there. I encourage you to check it out if you're interested in the global sort of discussion around gamification. And if you're interested in that or any of the other kind of more granular specific topics about it, some of you know that we've already announced the upcoming Gamification Summit 2014 in San Francisco. It's June 10th through the 13th. We're going to have a link up here for you for that as well shortly. You can get your questions in here, but if you come and join us in San Francisco, for those of you who haven't before, it's a super fun experience. We do all these workshops. There's workshops with me and other people. There's these amazing speakers. It's 3 days together with the most interesting thinkers about the subject of gamification from around the world across a really wide range of topics. You learn a lot, about the different subjects that that folks are interested in the different topics. It really is a great experience. I love it. I look forward to it every year, and we'll be announcing some of the new speakers that are part of the equation at GSummit 2014 shortly. So let's start off with our first question. Now, I would say your name, except you wrote your name in Arabic, and I can't read Arabic. So let's just say, hi, guy with the yellow equation avatar, and thanks for your question. And the question is about level 3 on the Udemy courses. Now, for those of you who don't know, we offer 2 gamification courses online on udemy.com. Gamification certification level 1 and level 2. And those two certs have been taken by quite a large number of people around the world. And you basically can earn your certification going through these different levels, understanding the basics of gamification, how it works, and then apply it, do a quick little exercise at the end of level 2, and actually earn one of those certifications. Now, level 3, the level 3 certification is the one that you can get live with me at events like GSummit or like we just did at GSummit Global. So far, level 3 has not been available as a digital option. And my sense is, I know we're going to try to get level 3 available online, but we probably will not have an online version of level 3 until close to the end of the year, if then. So what I want you to really think about very strongly is, if you're interested in earning a gamification certification and becoming an expert in designing gamification, and that's really a high priority for you, and it's within your means to do so, please come join us at GSummit. That's an opportunity for you to do this hands-on workshop with me and with some of the other experts who will be there. And if not, hopefully we'll have an online version of that for you soon. The level 3 is really the first time that you actually do something that is a sort of practical example of gamification at work, something that really, enables you to kind of move forward and sort of build what we call a gamification architecture, or a document that lays out kind of how you're going to gamify something. That's really something that that's required, that you really have to get to actually do. And translating that into an online course is actually complicated. I see that Nicola, who's joining us here at the show, maybe for the first time, or maybe you've been here before, but hi, Nicola, welcome. She's saying that she's about to start taking the online gamification course on Udemy with Kevin Warbach, which is a fantastic course, and many thousands of people have actually taken that course, or one of the other gamification courses on Coursera. Maybe I said Udemy, but I meant Coursera for Kevin's course. And as many of you know, we've had Kevin here as well, on the show before, talking on the gamification revolution about how to teach gamification, and his book, that he offers that you can get for the win. And I love Kevin's course. I actually think that it's fantastic, and it's so exciting that gamification's reached the point where it's actually being taught as a subject at university. And I think whether that's the open online course model of Coursera, or in the actual classroom, we're reaching that level where it's starting to become a kind of a core part of the curriculum. I've been asked by a pretty well-known design university, and actually I teach a course at Rutgers, for example, as part of their executive MBA, and I've been asked by another university and had a couple of other conversations about incorporating gamification into a classic curriculum at the university level. And I think those academic courses on gamification are really important and very core part of the fundamentals of gamification and the foundation. At some point, if you're actually planning to use it in practical terms in your work, you're going to want to take that understanding of it, the foundations, and be as in-depth as possible on behavioral economics, on organizational behavior and psychology, on the core precepts of game design. You're going to want to be grounded in those ideas, and then take them and turn them into a practical design discipline, where you're moving from the theoretical to the practical. We're actually doing the real architectural work that you need to do if you're actually interested in using it as part of your career, or using it as a as an element of your actual work, doing something. So that discipline is a little bit different, and that's something that I encourage everyone who's serious about doing gamification as a career element to actually do. So, Mr. or Mrs. Avatar, Yellow Avatar, I hope that you can join us at GSummit in June in San Francisco. If not, hopefully stay tuned, and we'll have a more practical, design-oriented Udemy course or online course available to you at some point over the next year. And similarly, level 4, which many of you have seen in the levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, there's a 4th level, but it's not yet been, we've not yet been talked about. Similarly, towards the end of the year, we're going to hopefully have something to say about a level 4 training that some of you will want to take. And I know that some of you are interested in really becoming sort of, masters at gamification, or the guru level, as Michael says. Hi, Michael. At that guru level, that you're going to want to actually take that level 4 and be able to share your knowledge with other people. That level 4 will be available also at some point in 2014. We have such a busy year planned here, you guys. We have got, we've got all kinds of stuff planned. And And I'm sure that you guys are going to be as excited about the stuff that we have to tell you, both in terms of videos and live events and books. Now, aren't you crazy curious to know who's going to be speaking at GSummit? Okay, you're going to find all that out at the middle of next week. We're going to announce the first set of speakers for GSummit. It's going to be amazing because I already know who many of them are, and you're going to love them. So there's a lot of exciting new content, a lot of exciting stuff coming on the coming on right now towards the future of this event and towards the future of this industry. And I think, I think you guys are going to love it. So stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and so on. And thanks very much for that question about Udemy. Now, okay, there we go. You know what? Now we know that that gentleman's name is Mohammed Hassan, Mohammed of the yellow avatar. Thank you, Mohammed, for your question. And he actually has a follow-up question, but first, let's just finish with the Udemy course, which is a popular question, and we have one question here from Dutch. So Dutch wants to publicly ask for an extension for his 90 days on his level 3 certification. And Dutch, just for you, yes, you can have an extension. So please do it. Now, please go ahead and submit. And so please also understand, for all of you who know and who are part of this process, we try to, the panel of people who approve gamification architectures, which often includes me and a number of other folks that you've probably met, it takes us a while to get to and get through absolutely everything that we need to get through. So one of the things that we have to be aware of and we have to consider is that it might take us a little bit longer to get to your questions and get answers to your certification than we might like. We'd love to be able to review it within a day, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer, and we understand that sometimes it takes you a little bit longer. All the certifications that you earned are good for about 2 years from the time that you get them. So Dutch, get that in as soon as you can, and hopefully we can get you sorted, and you can get you sorted. And it sounds like you're working for some scary government agencies, and hopefully you won't be spying on us too much. And Juan Carlos just asked about whether or not there's a deadline for the level 2. Juan Carlos, no, the level 2 certification, as soon as you're finished with the course on Udemy and you get that certificate from them, you can submit it. There's no real deadline for level 2. You will need to have your level 2 finished before you can earn your level 3 certification, but you don't have to have finished the level 2 course and earned it before taking the level 3 course, if that makes sense. So we have a question from Heiko. Hi, Heiko. Thanks for your question. Do we have any experience or know any solutions of gamifying offline activities, like a boss giving feedback to an employee? Great question. Okay. So much of when we talk about gamification, almost everything that we talk about is a digital world thing. We're often talking about something that is happening in software or happening online. And oftentimes though, we think about, does this really have to be in software? It's sort of like an assumption that people make, like, of course, gamification must be in software. It's probably even in mobile, and so it's very complicated and involved. And the truth is, it doesn't have to be. Things absolutely can happen in the physical world. Now, and in many companies, if you've ever worked in a sales team, you've probably been part of a gamification project before that's been done in Excel, right? It's a very common way to do it. Like, let's keep track of a bunch of stuff in an Excel spreadsheet. Here's a leaderboard where we do it with whiteboard markers and whatever. All these sort of game mechanics and game concepts being used in a pretty low-tech way. And in fact, just the other day, last week, 2 weeks ago, we had Amy Baskin on the show, and Ivan did a great job of hosting while I was on the road. And we had Amy Baskin on the show, and Amy talks all about how she works with students in a completely offline way, using really basic pedagogical tools, pen and paper, small objects and models, and things which really don't involve software. And what I would say to you, Heiko, is any example that you've seen, especially those involving feedback loops, could be done without software. And in fact, when you first do them, when you're first conceptualizing the design and doing your gamification architecture, and actually doing the initial even prototype phase for your product, you may not want to think about the technology at the beginning at all. Now, most people do. Most people conceptualize it as being in a mobile phone or being on a computer, but that's actually not what matters. What matters is getting the interaction right. You've got to be able to figure out what the correct set of things are the interactions between people, and it's really not about the technology that you actually end up using. What technology allows us to do well is it allows us to manage all of the data, manage all the information easily that's coming in and going out. So one of the things that we have to really think about is can we do with non-tech what we would do with tech? So if we're trying to track feedback with one employee or a boss and 4 employees, do we need any software? No, we don't. In fact, a boss could do a little tick sheet, off to the side here for employee tracking. Employees could do tick sheets and share them with each other. If you guys haven't seen this talk from John Guerrera from GSummit, it's actually really worth looking up, and Ivan will probably put a link to John's talk up on the web here on the show, so you can actually see it. John did this great case study of gamifying his own life with absolutely no, tech. It was all like Post-it notes and stuff. Hey, it can work. You don't need technology. I'd be interested in seeing, in more detail, kind of what the designs are that you're interested in. And then I'd love to know more about where it is that what it is that you think, and how it is that you actually will want to gamify something, and what role technology will or won't play in it. And maybe, Heiko, if you have if you have more specific comments or questions, you can also put them in there, and we'll try to kind of get some more specific answers to you. And actually, Matt Davis here in the chat was just saying that he saw John Guerrero live, and it was a great talk. And the link to the talk is actually in the chat with Ivan there. So well worth looking at. So another question from Mohammed, now Mohammed of the yellow avatar, Mohammed Hassan, thanks for that. So Mohammed is wondering about what happens when gamification is everywhere. And this is one of my favorite questions, because I love it. I love it when people ask this question. So if everything is gamified, won't everything therefore suck? Where won't gamification have reached the kind of level where, where it won't matter anymore? So everything will have game elements in it. It's all just going to be kind of like blah, game element blah. And I often think that this is an interesting question. So yes, in some level, if every single thing in the world had a whole bunch of, really clever game-like elements in it, and everybody was gamifying every aspect of their interaction, one could imagine that end users might at some point say, hey, wait a minute, this is kind of crazy. This feels very much like now everything is game-like and everything is, at the same level or the same temperature. So I'm not really noticing the highs and lows anymore. But in practice, I think this is very unlikely. First of all, because we're in very early days, you guys. We are 1% to 2% of the way to maximum gamification. We have not even begun to scratch the surface, And Michael exactly is making my point. Michael Finney making the point there. Thanks, Michael, for that in chat, which is that, the world is really pretty gray. I think if you look around at the kinds of interactions that you're having, particularly with companies, but also in your job and even mediated technology interactions between people, you find that very few of them have really fun elements in them. There's a lot of boring gray interactions. One of my favorite case studies in this, and I think, Mohammed, this maybe helps explain some of my thinking about it, that the Moscow subway gamification, which some of you might have seen, just came out a few months ago. So the idea was the machines that give you tickets in the Moscow subway, and the Moscow subway is one of the busiest subway systems in the world. Moscow is one of the world's largest cities. So the Moscow subway unveils this new machine that's intended to both be a sort of form of exercise and promotion for the Sochi Olympics, where you stand in front of the machine and you do a bunch of squats, like where you stand up and sit down and you squat, and you do a bunch of squats, and it gives you a free ticket for the train, right? So do a bunch of exercises, get a free ticket for the train. Awesome. Okay, so I'm talking about this subject to workshoppers in Amsterdam for GSummit Global that we just did. And we're talking, and Ivan has the squatting for Metro Passes link up in the chat. We're talking about it, and someone says right away, he goes, yeah, that would be great at rush hour, right? That idea is stupid because that wouldn't work at rush hour. Clearly, 20 million people trying to get subway tickets at 7:30 in the morning by having to do a bunch of squats isn't actually a practical solution for how we get subway tickets. But let me ask you a question. Is that actually the point of that product or service or interaction? I don't think that the designers in that case were looking for a way to reimagine the whole ticket issuance lifecycle, right? They were only trying to come up with a clever way to get people's attention, have a different interaction for a little while, promote the Sochi Olympics, promote a little bit of health, right? Do something cool. So that in and of itself is like a single interaction, but there's still so many ways to apply and bring gamification to the even just the issuance of tickets in the world, right? This is and in Moscow, let alone the rest of the world. So we are so far away from a moment of saturation. We're just so far away from it that at this point, the idea of saturation or the risk of saturation should not be a limiting factor in your thought process about how to bring gamification to any aspect of the world, because we are really, really super far away, really far away from that being a problem or a concern. And as Dutch and Michael talking here in the chat, I talking about how creativity and the number of permutations. The second answer to this question of gamification overload is really, this is a kind of an arms race market scenario, right? This isn't a situation in which we are, talking about one true way to gamify stuff. There actually isn't. There isn't only one approach. Yes, many of the mechanics reoccur. Things like points or badges or leaderboards giving rise to this PBL, somewhat pejorative concept of PBL. There is definitely this concept that we have these recurring mechanics and we see them over and over again. But the underlying engagement, the long-term arc of mastery, the connection between the user and the system that we're attempting to design here is actually pretty different every time. And I can tell you from the projects that I work on, we may bring the similar mechanics to the table, but the way we think about them and what we're trying to get people to do when we're working on a challenge, let's say for financial literacy, or we're working on a challenge for employee adherence to policies, or we're working on a marketing challenge, they're all different. So we're still using the same concepts, we're still using the same methodology, we may be using variants of the same mechanics, but the underlying ideas are really different. So the fact that you may interact with a gamified payment system and then interact with a gamified work product or work training system, right, in your life, that doesn't make either of them less fun if they've both been crafted well. And I think if the whole world got to the point, and honestly, you guys, if every company in the world, if every organization in the world gamified their interactions with their customers and their employees, I'll tell you something, I think that would be awesome. You might think at first that that would be like a terrible thing and that would be crazy, but I actually think it would be amazing because the underlying thought behind that, what that means is everyone has taken a step back and said, how do we make these encounters with our customers and our employees, our stakeholders, how do we make these fun? How do we make these engaging? How do we make them things that people actually care about and love and want to do in the long term and help move them forward? That would be an amazing thing. That would be an amazing thing. That would be a great thing. So I think rather than worrying about gamification overload, Mohammed, which is not a bad question, just saying, rather than worrying too much about gamification overload, let's start by thinking about the best way that we can do this. And maybe if we get to a day when there's gamification overload, that'll be the day that I will finally be like, okay, our work here is done. I'm teasing. Hopefully that won't happen. That our work will never be done because there's always more fun to bring to the world. So Nicola asks, I was worried about gamification applications being too much fun and distracting from what you're supposed to do. How do we make that work? Great. I think sort of more like a statement or concern rather than a question, but let me make it into a question, Nicola, and thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. So how do we balance off the differences, the track about making something fun from the track of the activity itself? And if what we're looking to do is make something more fun and engaging, could we also take away from the thing that's actually meaningful? So one of the things that we try to do, Nicola, in helping people understand how to design gamification, for example, if you take one of the workshops or if you come to GSummit, that what we try to do is try to actually think about these things as being aligned. So part of the process, like when I work on a project, if someone hires me to come do a project, the first thing that I do is we come in and try to figure out what's the organization trying to achieve, what does the user want, what are they looking for, right? And then the overlap between those two things, I'm making a Venn diagram in space. I love Venn diagrams. The overlap between those two things, combined with the concepts of fun, engagement, flow, positive reinforcement, that's where the system needs to be designed. So actually threading the needle there. We're not trying to keep the core activity the same and layer some fun stuff on top of it if we can find a way to make the activity and the actual fun elements interwoven. Now, at some point, you end up with some amount of conflict in this interaction. This is some of the place where some gamification critics sort of misunderstand or also kind of are fall prey to sort of magical thinking about the way that the world works. So, for example, in some parts of the world, you have to pay tolls at a toll booth, right, when you pass by. And there are often people who are hired to do that job. They stand in a booth and they have to take tolls from the people that go by. Now, we can automate that job, but let's say for whatever reason, that role isn't an automated role. That's actually a role that has to continue to be with a certain group of people. Or so even when it's automated, you still need some people doing the regular tolls. Okay, let's just say that that's a given. Ergo, this job continues to exist. Now, that job is terrible. In fact, it's often rated the worst job in the United States, for example, even though it's highly compensated, the work is reasonably safe. It's got a bunch of hazards like the weather and people's windshield wipers going, but it's kind of a terrible job. But the job still has to be done. So some people would argue that we shouldn't attempt to bring any gamification into it because we can't fundamentally remake the job in the mold of something that people would really be encouraged and motivated to want to do. That's one argument that people make. It should be all about your intrinsic desire to want to do this job. And so anything that we do around this job should be all targeted about that intrinsic reinforcement. And I actually generally would agree with that sentiment. I'd say fundamentally, we want to make that experience as fun and meaningful in a fundamental way as we possibly can. But no matter what we do, at the end of the day, the job of a toll taker is to take some money from thousands of passing motorists a day, most of whom don't even pay attention to you, most of whom are rude in all kinds of weather conditions. You got to take that money and make some change. It is not a fundamentally motivational job beyond what I just described. Though Ivan suggests it could be a zombie or phantom toll booth, and then it could be really cool. But let's just leave it with regular life real toll booth. So my argument has always been, what we need to do is we need to incrementally move in the direction of better, more fun, more reasonable, more meaningful. Sometimes you can't go into an organization or a situation and radically transform it all throughout everything, because at the end of the day, things just have to happen. Things need to get done. Jobs need to get done. Consumers need to buy some products. People got to eat. People got to drive a train, whatever. So the goal is to try to make some elements of this work better. And sometimes that means layering some stuff on top of, for example, a toll booth operator's job that maybe gives them a simple kind of reward or some kind of simple bonus for engaging in activity, gives them some stats, creates opportunities for positive feedback. But we can't fundamentally transform that job in the way that I think many people would like for us to always do. All that having been said, really interesting article from this past week in Slate that I think is worth actually looking at. I think it was in Slate, it may have been in Salon, but we'll look it up for you. There's a great article in there about people who talk all about how jobs should be entirely based on what you love and entirely what you're driven by and what you're motivated by. And the writer was writing about how demeaning that actually is for people who have to work for a living, how difficult that is for folks who are who find themselves in a situation where they have to work rather than it's optional for them to work. And I want everybody who comes from that incredibly privileged position, who believes that work is all about the aspirational goals of the user, to take a real step back and look around at the world that most people are in. There you go. Ivan's got the post, of course, the Do What You Love article. I want you to read that and really understand and try to internalize this. For all of us who are really driven by what we love and have the privilege of being able to do what we love all the time, it's very easy to ignore the fact that many people don't have that option. And therefore, the job of the gamifier, or the gamification designer in that particular instance, is to try to make that person's job a little bit better. Try to make their life in their work a little bit better. you know what, maybe we can't make the toll booth operator's job amazing. Similarly, there's been a lot of gamification for call centers. Maybe we can't radically transform the call center job, you guys. Maybe we have to like actually, we have to actually like work with the world as it is, and that some call center jobs are kind of crappy, and so our job is just to try to make that a little bit better. And I think if you can see the world through that sort of, incremental prism, I think that's not a terrible, terrible thing to do. As the conversation's been going on here in the chat, one interesting thing that has been brought up is, that I am from Canada, and yes, it is true. I am from Toronto, and so I try to get back up there and do cool stuff. In fact, we had a fantastic, fantastic gamification workshop in Toronto with some really great people, really cool stuff happening in Toronto, you guys. Not just a crack smoking mayor anymore. Lots of other things happening. So a quick question from Juan Carlos. We're going to be running out of time in a little while here. But just want to pull up this question from Juan Carlos about the gamification of CRM and CRM sales platforms, and talking about PBL. And why is it that gamified CRM platforms are not as fun as they could be or they should be? CRM stands for Customer Resource Management, and we may be confusing CRM and Salesforce Automation. But let's just lump them all together. Some kind of customer management, sales employee management tools. Why can't they be more fun? Okay. So number one, I would say to you, in fact, there are some good examples of gamified CRM and Salesforce automation that are highly successful. The first one is most sales programs in general are actually highly gamified. They've been run sort of the same way for 2 generations, and at a fundamental level, they work. Salespeople are often highly competitive, so on that kind of Bartles player type, achiever socializer, achiever killer, killer socializer quad, part of the equation. Salespeople are often very motivated to be the best, and often motivated strongly to beat other people. This is a combo, motivation that they have. So systems which are more maybe hardcore, like here's your ranking, this is the total amount of money that you've sold, total amount of stuff that you've sold. Here's a list of the top 10 salespeople. This is the bonus that you get if you're one of the top 10. You get to go to Hawaii. All these kind of sales incentive programs, they are reasonably effective for that audience because they tap into a core type of game motivation. As folks have been looking at alternatives in Salesforce automation and CRM, most of the attention has been paid to addressing 2 things which the standard sales gamification system doesn't address. The first one is, what about people who are not in the top 10? Right? That's one question. And the second one is, how can we motivate salespeople in a way that isn't just about giving them more cash? Those are the 2 questions typically we're trying to address with gamification. So for the first one, how do we motivate people not in, and there's a third one, by the way, a third corollary sometimes, which is, how do we get people to do things which are helping behavior, but not necessarily directly connected to sales? So how do we get them to be more consultative, really listen to the customer's needs, and so on and so forth? Can we use gamification to do all that? So just addressing these briefly, first and foremost, if we are trying to get people who are not in the top 10 to be motivated, obviously systems that use simple leaderboards, where it's like, here's the top 10 people, simple leaderboards are motivational for people who are high killer achiever types who are on that leaderboard. But the people off the leaderboard, the guy number 70, position number 75 on the leaderboard, or even for that matter, the woman at position number 13, who's been trying to crack that leaderboard for months and months and months and can't because the people in the top 10 have been there for 10 years and they game the system and everything. If that top 10 group can be very motivational, can also be really demotivating for everyone else. So the first job has really been to try to unpack that and come up with different ways to use motivational techniques like leaderboards to drive better behavior. So changing the leaderboard to be more social, changing it to be team-based, expiring the leaderboard on a really more regular basis, building a circuit instead of a straight leaderboard. All these approaches are ones which deliver incremental value. The second side of it, which is to to incentivize people in non-cash ways. Salespeople are typically very cash motivated, but at some point the cash has to sort of max out, or maybe it has maxed out, or maybe the company's in a difficult environment, and organizations want to start motivating people with other techniques like the SAPS model of rewards that we've talked about before, status, access, power, and stuff. And sometimes they want to drive a whole host of behaviors. So gamification and game mechanics can be used in this context to do a pretty good job with that. Companies like Level 11, for example, we had the founder of Level 11 speak last year at GSummit. Companies like Level 11 and even the Salesforce plugin applications that have been developed to do gamified CRM and SFA, Here's another case one, Carlos, where I will tell you, are any of them perfect? Probably not. Are they getting great results at the outset? It seems like it. I mean, you look at the history of level 11 and what Bob Marsh has been able to do at level 11, pretty amazing. Really great early traction and cool things are happening. So again, incremental approach here, maybe delivering the value that we want. But there's still lots of opportunity. I don't know if you're thinking about, you're thinking about trying to crack this market, how to approach doing gamified CRM. The first thing that I would look at is I'd look at all the other people who've done it and see what you think they do well and what you think they don't do well, and then attack the specific problem area that you think they need to solve. If you're launching a new company from scratch, let me remind you, and I remind every startup that uses gamification of the same thing, it's not enough to have a great gamification solution. Like if you're launching a new CRM platform, it's going to be difficult to say, oh, we are going to be successful just because we've got great gamification, right? You need to have all great, the CRM functions all have to be good. Those are the table stakes of that market. You've got to have good core CRM fundamentals. And then you've got to use the gamification elements of that product or service or process to deliver better business results than other people are able to deliver. So rather than saying, oh, we have a CRM that's gamified, what you should say is, we have a CRM that 50% more gets 50% more usage by employees than other CRMs. So in fact, your investment is amortized better because you get much more usage out of it from the employees. And oh, by the way, how do we do that? We do that with gamification. We do that with really smart design. That makes sense. Now I want you to rethink kind of the way that you frame the problem, and also even the problem that you're addressing. Probably it's worthy of a quick rethink for you to approach that. Okay, one very last question here from Dutch. What search do we use when we're looking for an enterprise gamification job? This is a great question. You guys, I've been saying this for a while. Jobs with companies putting a head of gamification or head of game design into their organization are a really good sign of the adoption of gamification at a fundamental level by organizations. Once a company turns its attention to this problem and says, you know what, we need a director of gamification in here, you know that there is a core underlying strategy at that organization to support the concepts of gamified design throughout the company. This is a great sign. And more organizations are doing this. More and more companies are elevating people into the post of director of gamification or looking for people with direct gamification experience. And I think if you're interested in pursuing that, one of the main things is, I think we need to, I've been saying for a while, I'd love to have a kind of centralized resource for doing this. But if I were searching for those jobs, first and foremost, I'd be searching for gamification as a search term. I think if you're actively looking for work with your gamification skills, the number one thing you should have is you should have a standing search on every site, Craigslist, Monster, whatever, with the word gamification in it. Dutch, of course, already doing that. And then I would want to parse that. But other terms that I'd want to look for are like employee engagement, customer engagement, employee incentives, team incentives. These are some of the terms: engagement, incentives, motivation. Those are some of the terms that you want to look for. And I think if you're building a good search for work, I think you'd have all of those terms in there. Obviously, as soon as you see a job posting, that has gamification in it, right? You kind of want to jump on that and definitely like kind of add that to the discussion and make sure that you put your name in for that right away, especially if you got your certification almost. But if you got your certification, you've got experience building things, you can point to a case study. Part of why we are so practical in the level 3 certification that you can take at GSummit in June is that at the end you actually have this document, an architecture. You can actually take it to a prospective employer and say, look, I know how to do this. Let me show you one that I've already done for a project. And I think that can be meaningful. And Michael asks what background, knowledge, or experience. My point about that in general is, some design experience. And if you're really keen to do it, I think getting the grounding at a gamification workshops or taking your certification, taking Kevin's course, taking our course on Udemy, getting the level 3 in person at GSummit, I think those are all great ways to start. But you're going to want some practical experience. So once you've got the grounding in it, hey, why not go to companies that you like, or why not go to nonprofits? As part of level 2 certification on Udemy, we ask you to do a project for a nonprofit. Go to a nonprofit that you really care about. Go to a government agency. Go to a friend's company or a startup that you really like. And you go and you say, hey, you guys, you know what? I know how to do this gamification stuff and drive engagement. you know, can I help you? And offer up your help until you got a project to work on. And that'll start building your resume and start building your credibility so that you can then turn around and hopefully go monetize that in a great way. And of course, there's all the gamification platforms companies and consulting companies out there already that exist. You can see all of this in the buyer's guide at Gamification Co. And internal projects, as Michael says. You guys, we are out of time. This is actually a long session for us, but it's cool because I'm so excited about all your great questions. I know that we haven't gotten to all of your questions. There's still some in the queue, but I ask you so much. Please come back and join us again next week. We have guests next week. We've got guests coming up over the next few weeks, including some very exciting surprise guests that I know you guys are going to want to hear from. Yes, Brian Burke. I haven't revealed the secret. Brian Burke, author of an upcoming book on gamification, and analyst at Gartner, the guy who talks about 80% of gamification projects will fail, and talks about how 80% of companies will use gamification in the next couple of years. Brian Burke, controversial analyst Brian Burke, will be here with us to talk about his work and his research and why he thinks that the majority of gamification projects are doomed to fail and what you can do to avoid it, along with other great guests who are going to be here in the run-up from now until GSummit June 10th through the 13th in San Francisco. Be sure to RSVP for next week's show. Check out gsummit.com if you guys are interested in joining us in San Francisco in June. You can follow me on Twitter at GZichermann. For all of you who are with us live today, thank you so much. For all of you watching at home, join us Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern for the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zichermann. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Keep having fun.